So yes, we do make those adjustments. Bom dia once again. Ik era cara turhende kusi botading auto working to bading ko bahan to boker sige escucha episode aqui por vai ba YouTube e Facebook di Colefam e YouTube di Sincere Carolina onako por sige episode awe, but you can also rewatch in case of that you cannot tune in the whole thing live. And on Tuesdays we are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so do not worry. Today is World Oceans Day, and I said last week we were going to talk about that, so that is what we're going to talk about. I will let our special guests introduce themselves in a little bit, and we have a mermaid in the house, so I'm very excited about that. I just learned she's a mermaid, so now I'm like, can we be besties? But yes, for those of you that don't know Sincere Carolina, we are here to educate, motivate, hopefully for you to make better choices about things that I think matter, like our ocean. So I'm here to talk about whatever I want to talk about. And I am so grateful my sponsors think that those topics are interesting, at least, and sometimes important. So thank you to Total, to La Roche-Posay, to Pringles, and to Ecos. I appreciate you so, so much. So before I go over into introducing our guests, I remind you to be kind and nice. So if you do have comments, I will look at them eventually. And if you say something that we don't like, it will be removed, okay? So without further ado, I will let our guests introduce themselves. And we will start with Tyson, because, you know, you're sitting like right in front of me. So we're going to start with you. Tyson, tell us who you are, why you're here today, and anything that we should know about you.
Yes, good morning, Carolina. Happy World Oceans Day to everyone sitting on the table also. My name is Tyson Lopez. I'm the CEO of Aruba Conservation Foundation. And we are here actually to share some information about ocean, the state of the ocean in Aruba, what we're doing, how we're helping, and collaborating also with the community here on the island.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. All right, so Nichole, I'm going over to you. Can you tell us who you are and what do you do and why you're here today?
Yeah, sure. I'm Nichole Danser, and I'm from Scubble Bubbles. And we're all about trying to get the youth involved in ocean conservation and get everyone to love and appreciate the ocean. And part of that is also being a mermaid, because mermaids are in the ocean. And so really my passion is getting other people passionate, and that's what I try to do with Scubble Bubbles, and I'm so happy that I get to work with the Aruba Conservation Foundation to help our oceans.
I'm not sure how many young girls are listening, but if they are and they got excited, we will eventually talk about how you too can become a mermaid and get involved. But I think if I would be in the car right now and I hear that there is a mermaid on the radio, I would be like, Mom, Dad, whatever she's doing, I want to do that.
I just have to say, though, that there is no age limit to mermaiding.
Ooh.
So it's not just young girls.
Okay, so if there is
or
like
girls, it can also be boys.
True. What are they called? Mermaids?
Depends on who you ask.
Okay.
Some people just say mermaid is gender neutral.
Okay, cool. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I'm here for
Mer
it.
people.
Mer people. Mer people. Okay. Anyways, we're going to continue. Siietske, can you introduce yourself and tell us who you are, why you're here today?
Good morning, Carolina. Thank you for having us here today on World Oceans Day. I, like Tyson, also work for ACF, Aruba Conservation Foundation. I work as the interim marine park manager. I'm a marine biologist, and I'm mostly focused on the marine parts of ACF's work.
Okay.
So I'm daily working in the sea or with components of the sea.
All right, so Siietske, I am getting signals from outside that you need to talk a little bit closer to the mic because they're not hearing you enough. But that's okay. So I got you're a marine biologist and you're the interim manager at the marine park.
For marine protected areas, yes.
Okay. All right. So Alex, if you're out there, can you please come help me out because the volume is all the way up. Anyways. Okay, so I want to start with why do we have marine parks in the first place? I mean, when we think about parks, I think the most general, understanding of that is a green place, right? Or, if you grew up in Aruba, you might think of like places like Parque Aricok or Casibari, an area where you can go to and do fun stuff, but also be in touch with nature. But when we think about oceans, we think it's like a one big thing. And, how do parks work in the ocean, right? And how do we decide which areas are or not? Which areas, should have like special protection or special attention versus others. So I don't know, whomever wants to chime in on that question and explain a little bit. Just like I'm curious, I'm sure other people are curious.
I will start with the areas. Basically, Aruba has designated a few marine protected areas. We call it Parque Marina Aruba, but it's marine protected areas. It's at Cerro Colorado, Baby Beach, Rogers Beach, and you have it also at Santo Largo, Mangal Alto, Swans Lagoon, and also at the Orionstadt Reef. So outside of the port, you can also there's an area there, and outside of Parque Nacional Aricok also. It was designated to be protected, to be managed, so the government of Aruba has decided that this area has an important ecological, biological value, and that is the reason that we need to work to manage it. And when we say manage it, it's coming up with rules and regulations, it's monitoring, it's restoring, it's doing different conservation activities inside these areas that we are mandated by the government. So Aruba Conservation Foundation has an agreement with the government, so a service level agreement, and we work with on different targets on how to improve the state of nature. And basically Siietske does the main part of the job together with marine park rangers, but they are the ones who are daily out there.
So I have a question, and it's a question. I make it sound like I'm like about to make like a very drastic question, but but when you say mandated by the government, is it like a plan that is made from the government and then they just let you know which areas, or is it like, do y'all do it together and with maybe other organizations to decide?
You're really a policymaker. So the designation of the area, so where the area is based on research and also consultation. But the marine management plan, or all management plans basically, are with consultation also with different stakeholders. So for the marine park management plan, we had different stakeholder engagement with local fishermen, divers, nature lovers, experts, enforcement agencies. So it's an inclusive collective action that we take.
Okay. I ask because I do think it's important for, everybody who's listening to understand that, when these areas are designated and when projects are done, that usually it takes a whole village to make them happen.
Yeah.
So thank you for explaining that. So
If I can add something to it.
And I can hear you well now, too, so I figured it out.
It's very important to realize that nature, and especially marine nature, is all connected. So we shouldn't only be protecting it inside protected areas. This counts on land as well. So it actually, the protected areas offer a system for rules and regulation, but please take these rules and regulations as an example for your behavior everywhere else as well.
Okay, got it. I think that's a good example. But while I have you, Stacey, can you please explain to us what you do in your job? Because, we use big words, but what do you do? And what does it mean, to be a marine park manager, but also, as a marine biologist? I think that is something that, at least when I was younger and when I was deciding what to study, it was mentioned, but people would be like, oh, but those are not like real jobs, or like, it's like you can't work in that in Aruba. And it's like that about a lot of things, a lot of environmental studies, really, at least when I was growing up, were seen as these like almost like hobby careers, and I always thought like, no, and I'm not saying it in any offensive way, but I do think it's important for people to do understand that these are like, you're doing real work. And these are real jobs, because
And
if there are
important work.
exactly, and I think that if there are young people out there also listening who are trying to find some inspiration, that they understand that these are opportunities that you can go for, and that it is important work, it is nice fun work, I hope. I know your boss is sitting right next to you, but but tell us a little bit about what you do every day to take care of our ocean.
So it's the job varies a lot.
Okay.
It's very different every day. So I can't really describe what a day looks like, because it's every day is different, something else is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes nature is on fire, sometimes literally, but often it's not literally. But something's happening that needs immediate response. But the main work for conservation and marine conservation, you can basically split it into two compartments, which we call fundamental conservation and thematic conservation. And the fundamental conservation is like the border control, making sure everybody adheres to the rules and regulations within the areas, making sure it's clear where the areas are, what the rules and regulations are. And then there's the thematic component, which has sometimes a bit more excitement in it, because it has that more variability. And that's where we do most of the restoration work. It's really focused on the different key aspects or the key values within nature. For example, we need for our waters to function properly, we need healthy corals, we need healthy seagrass, we need healthy populations of sharks. So those are the themes you will focus on in this thematic conservation. And then often it starts with figuring out first what is needed to conserve these species or habitats. So what's their state? What are the threats? And how do we tackle that? What are the best approaches for Aruba's context? Because we can always borrow ideas from other areas as well and get inspired by what other countries are doing. But we always have to figure out, will that work for Aruba? Because it's never exactly the same. And then sometimes it also has this little bit of trial and error, because you're doing it for the first time in Aruba and you have to see if it works here. So that's also something to keep in mind. And it's always good to check with people in the field. So that's why in the development of the management plan for the marine protected areas, we included many stakeholders in different sessions, and they came with very valuable feedback that really helps set the tone and give insight in what is needed for Aruba.
And Nichole, you're here because you are part of this type of work, right? So can you tell us a little bit about the project that Scubble Bubbles, started with, and your collaboration, of course, with the Aruban Conservation Foundation, but also, it's trial and error. You decided we're gonna do this. I want to know why, because we know why, but explain to people why there is a project like that, and how did y'all find out that was an important project to start with, and where are we now and where are we going towards? So a bunch of questions, but
Yeah.
I want to hear it all.
And easy questions too. Thank you. No, but I'll start with a little bit about Scubble Bubbles and how we started. And it started as a way for me to get to scuba dive while still teaching math. Pure and simple. I was diving with my
Nice.
students. They were getting certified. And as they were seeing the ocean, I was seeing it through their eyes as well. And they would ask me a lot of difficult questions.
Okay.
And I'm not a marine biologist. I'm actually a math teacher.
Actually, a math teacher, and she says it like so easily. I'm pretty sure a lot of people had a very hard time with math. I think that's cool.
Probably. Well, that's why I had to dive with my students, so that they knew I was not completely just a math nerd. But we were diving, and they were asking me these questions about the reef, and I was like, I don't know, guys, but let's figure it out. Let's learn. So we started finding resources, talking to the science teachers, and then watching videos. And it became apparent that the reefs were in peril and in danger. And so the kids wanted to do something for the reefs. And I was like, all right, let's do something. And we found it difficult to find a project that was already happening that we could just support. So they wanted to give up, but I was like, no, let's go. So we went to Bonaire, learned about coral restoration during spring break, mind you. So they gave up their spring break. It was scuba diving, but still. And volunteered at nurseries there. And then we came back and they built their own nursery here. And what was supposed to be just a fun little project with my students grew into this foundation that I'm so honored and blessed to be, like, to have. It gives me purpose in life. And so we are like a grassroots kind of a thing. It's very small. It's all volunteers. It keeps me young because I volunteer with a bunch of young people. And we're so lucky we have coral nurseries, and we're small, so we have a hard time kind of getting funding, but we have wonderful partners that we can partner with, like the Aruba Conservation Foundation. And with their Turning the Tide project, part of it is not only artificial structure for the reef, but also putting natural corals on there. And because we were already working with the corals, it made sense to just combine our efforts and work together.
So, first of all, I just want to ask for clarification for anybody who might be listening. Can you just briefly explain what a coral nursery is? Because, if you are not in that bubble, you might not know what that is. So explain that first and then we'll continue.
So a coral nursery is actually, if you kind of just imagined a nursery for our kids, is a place where we keep them safe, we take care of them, let them build up until they're strong enough to kind of not take care of themselves, but go off to school or into the big world. And so a coral nursery, our nurseries right now are in the water, and we take small coral fragments that we have permission to do this, by the way. Not everyone can just go grab corals.
Good.
Make sure we put that out there.
Yes.
And so we grow them from small, and they're on, we call them Christmas trees, because they're tree-like structures made of pipe, and the corals grow there. They hang from fishing line.
Okay.
And so they're just kind of floating in the water column. That way they have less predators, less chance for algae or other coral diseases to get a hold of them. So there's a little less threat. So we can kind of mitigate a little bit about what their dangers are for them. And we go out and we make sure that there's no algae, no fire coral. So we just kind of tend to our little baby corals until they're big enough. And then we get to outplant them onto
like the bigger areas, right?
Put them out into the big bad world.
Yeah. I like how you explained that. So, my question then is, how do we get to the point that this was needed, right? I mean, we have had Christy here from Plastic Beach Party and the Metabolic Foundation, and we have talked about mapping and how thanks to technology, we have been able to see differences with like algae, but also coral growth and decay, but changing color, all that kind of stuff. So we know that there are things happening, but I think it's important to talk about why are these things happening in Aruba, because around the world there might be different things pushing that. But in our Aruban context, and what does it really mean for regular people? Because I mean, if I don't like going to the beach and if I don't like snorkeling or scuba diving, you might very easily think that I don't really care if there isn't like a scenery, right? Or something to go see. But it's a little bit beyond that. So I would like for any of you to explain why it's a little bit beyond that and how important these things truly are for our well-being as a country, but the people living on it too.
Yeah, so great question. And it's actually, so whether you live near the sea, go to the sea or not, we all depend on the ocean and the health of our ocean. It regulates basically every system that we have. It also basically, if there's no ocean, there's no rain. So it's so connected to everything that we see as normal. The temperatures on the planet are regulated through our oceans as well. That's why we see the El Nino and the La Nina happening, and that comes from our oceans. So it's very important to realize that even if you've never seen the ocean yourself, which on Aruba is kind of hard, even if you're never in touch with the ocean, you depend on it for your life. And you also depend on the ocean being healthy and all the life inside the ocean being healthy, because that is what creates those systems that regulate our ocean. It's there are some things that are happening right now with climate change, and it's very important to realize while it's big and we're a very small island and we cannot have a big impact maybe on the bigger process, it's still important to do our part and to realize that it's something we also can combat with nature-based solutions. By restoring aspects within our seas, we can also contribute. For example, mangroves and seagrasses, they are very good at getting carbon out of the air, and climate change is partly triggered by excess carbon in the air. So it's really important to restore these natural processes that can help combat climate change. Furthermore, most of us already know that our seas are a bit degraded, that our environment is not what it used to look like when we were kids. And especially if you ask your grandparents, what did the sea look like, it looks very different today. And it's multiple impacts, and all are connected to us, humans. Whether it's invasive species or just unregulated recreational activities. It can be overexploitation, it's pollution, and there's many different forms of pollution happening in our sea, from the wastewater to the waste itself. There's so many different impacts, so it's not just one thing impacting our ocean, it's many of them. And that has caused that right now, if we're talking about the corals, basically the corals, a lot of them have died off by all these threats and diseases, and because of that their structure has gone lost. And this triggered actually two negative spirals, a double negative spiral that causes that it cannot restore itself. The negative spirals are, on one hand, because there's no structure, there's no stable ground for corals to settle on, for new corals to grow. So it reduces coral even further, and even the dead corals that are rolling around knock on the ones that are still alive and break them down as well. So it basically dead coral destroying coral at the same time. So that reduces the structure even further. And then on the other hand, because there's no structure of the corals anymore, all the fish and the marine life that is needed to keep these corals healthy usually have also disappeared, because they don't have a place to hide anymore. They don't feel like they have a home anymore.
Right.
And in these two ways, basically the health keeps decreasing itself even further. So it's very important that we tackle that by actually reintroducing that structure, that stable ground. And that's the joint project that we're working in, that we're partnering in, where we're introducing this 3D structure through artificial reefs, so that we have that stable ground to basically stabilize the bottom, making sure that the dead corals are not rolling around anymore, and that there's also a stable structure for the beautiful coral fragments from Scubble Bubbles to be placed on and grow. And it's actually really exciting to see right now that we've planted them out in February, March of this year, and they're growing and they're fusing with the structures. So it's really excited to see.
So, some people listening might be like, okay, so we have an issue which humans caused, for most part, right? And now we're trying to fix it, and in that process, we are introducing foreign objects, right? And I can imagine that different people might have different opinions on this. So can you maybe explain a little bit about that project? And you explained about the impact and why it's important, but I also think it's very important for people to hear that, yes, although we have caused some issues because of globalization and technology, etc., but we can also use those things hopefully to fix a little bit of what we damaged in that process. So I don't know if you can explain about how that project works, how that introduction has been, but also a little bit about what the plans are for the people who might not, be following the project along, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's we're actually using two different types of structures. Also, because it's part of a pilot project, so we're trying. As I mentioned earlier, it's kind of trial and error here and there. You need to figure out what will work for the Aruba context. So both of these structures are aimed to be non-toxic to the environment. The one is a concrete structure, so it's hexagonal prisms they fit on each other like Lego blocks,
Okay.
and together they form a structure in whichever design we would like, basically. We've chosen to create pyramids for this pilot, but it's basically to see if it works,
Okay.
and then once we know it works, we can expand further.
Okay. So you're trying out the different shapes to see
Yes.
which one works best. Okay,
Yes.
okay.
And then, so that concrete structure, it's non-toxic to the environment, and it also has a special regulation in the concrete mix, where they regulate the pH, so
Okay.
how acidic it is, so that it's extra good for corals to grow on. So
Okay.
extra attractive for corals to grow on. And then the other structure that we're testing is from Mars Sustainable Solutions. So they are Mars Reef Stars. They are actually very small, spider-like shapes,
Okay.
made of rebar. And because metal, rebar, is not as attractive for corals to grow on, we coat these with epoxy and sand. So epoxy is basically, we use it as a glue to make the layer of sand on top of it. It gets 2 coats, so we're sure there's basically no rebar iron exposed, and the sand fixed, so basically turned into rock with the epoxy, is that fixed structure that again is a natural growth enhancer for corals to settle on.
Okay. I think that sounds very interesting. And I love to hear that you're trying different things, because also something that I hear in Aruba, and it is because I am in the policy bubble, Tyson. I hear those things. Is that, because we are small, we often look outside and we call it copy, adapt, paste, right? We try to, and I don't think that's necessarily bad, but I do think it's important, right, to do this process. And then sometimes people, you might get a little bit agitated because they want things to go faster, but it is very hard. The Aruban context, although we're so small, it's very peculiar in so many different ways. The way our system works, the way our people work, right? So it does take some time to kind of figure that out, and I like hearing that even more than I like hearing like, oh, we got this project from I don't know where, and we're doing the whole full-blown project in this way. So I think it's nice, and I hope that people who are listening understand that that is also given the Aruban organizations, right, the power, the autonomy to figure that out. I think that's nice.
It's really a big component of this project. While we're testing the different aspects or the different methods, we're also focusing a lot on capacity building. We've trained many people. We've included many volunteers in this process in coating all those reef stars with epoxy and sand. Over 200 volunteers were involved in that. Yep. And there's a big collaboration with the University of Aruba as well. There's students from Wageningen University coming to help do the research and monitoring, making sure that the changes that we cause are measured, whether they're positive or negative, so that also we can see the effect if it's working, because it's a pilot, because we're trying to figure out if it works. If it doesn't work, at least we can figure out why because of all this monitoring.
Exactly.
So that we can make the adjustment necessary for a more successful approach in the next round. And it's really also, so the structures that we're using, they're as natural as possible. Many people, when they hear artificial reefs, they're thinking of sinking boats or planes or these kinds of, or containers or these kinds of things. But if you don't treat them properly, for example, Antillas is a shipwreck that's almost 100 years underwater in Aruba, and it's still visible as a shipwreck. It hasn't been completely overtaken by corals, which is actually what you want to achieve with
Okay.
restoration. You want to create a reef. So you basically want that structure that you place there for the reef to grow on to not be visible anymore after some time.
Interesting.
I just want to add because
Go ahead.
no. One thing is, Siietske already mentioned at the beginning. Basically, we are people of the ocean. So, as an islander, nós está gente de lama, but a lot of us does not dive or does not snorkel, does not swim. So
or
you
fish,
don't.
right? Because the people who fish might also
Also, I
notice
mean,
it.
a lot of the fishermen has a lot of data and knowledge. But because a lot of us doesn't, we don't know the change that's happening in the ocean. And on the land, you can see it, you can see the drastic change, but on the ocean, you don't. And that's why a lot of people doesn't understand the work or doesn't understand the importance of it. And that's why in this project, we have the volunteer part and the capacity building part is to connect people more with the ocean so they can see it also and be involved. I mean, that's why Scubble Bubbles is such a great organization to work with also, because they have these kids, youngsters, teenagers. I don't know if there's an age code out there, but yeah. But that's how to get people involved. And you cannot be passionate about, you cannot conserve something if you've never seen it or experienced it. So it's important to connect people with nature and ocean in this case.
I love that, and I'm really happy to see that, to see the level of outreach and involvement happening, and I think it's very important that everybody who's hearing that to know that and to share that as well with others, even if it's not your thing, but that you take maybe some time. Not everything has to be in the water. So if you don't like going in the water, what I hear, there are opportunities, outside of the water where you still learn, where you can still contribute. And I think that's very important. So now I want to ask, not the harder questions, but the more confronting questions. I want to know, what are we doing as, the Aruban community that is not good for our ocean? And I do want us to touch on that, because hopefully after today, after hearing things, we can make some adjustments. And we have seen bans, we have seen single-use plastic bans, we have seen the bans of certain ingredients in sunscreens, and when these things happen, we hear that it is because it impacts the ocean in some way, and those are efforts in that context. But what else? Because it's, I think, a little bit more than just those two things. So I do want, you are the ones doing the work and seeing what is happening, to tell us what are we doing that has been damaging our ocean, and what is truly in our hands, because like Siietske mentioned, we are a small island in a big global aspect, so there might be things that are in no way, our impact. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't want to say any specific things, but I do want to
No,
say.
please do specific things too.
Yeah, but one of the things, and you also just said it, we're a small island, so what can we do? That is also, though, a little bit of the problem, because we think, oh, it's a big ocean. I'm just one person. What is my personal impact on the ocean? And it can be both positive and negative, yeah? If my 8 students had said, we're just 8 teenagers and 1 teacher, what can we do? We wouldn't have done anything. So we wouldn't have even made that step, yeah? And if we're like, it's just 1 cigarette. Oh, it's just 1 shark that I've fished out. It's just 1 plastic bag. That builds up. So even though we're a small island, even though we may just be 1 person or a family of 5, everything we do, every choice we make does have some kind of an impact. And so if we can think about what our choices, what impact those do have, I think that's a big deal.
Yes, and I 100% agree. I talk a lot about that, and I do not necessarily like being devil's avocado,
No, but do it.
but I do have a TikTok account. I'm not active on there, but I do see stuff. And a couple of days ago, my girlfriends, they sent me a TikTok video, and I thought it was very interesting because I personally, Carolina, believe in that we do have an impact, and even if they come with some research and tell me that not really, I would like to at least be at peace, and if that gives me peace, I will do that, right? But the video was talking about, for example, like climate change. Like right now, like this year specifically, we're seeing very intense heat waves. The level of CO2 in our air in this moment is like record high. We do know there are wars going on, which are very bad for the environment, yada, 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 right? So there is a lot going on. And I do think it's important to talk about the individual things, but also that, even if you do those changes, I don't want to say that that's not enough,
Right.
but I want to encourage people to also, advocate a little bit about the bigger things that we do not have direct control of. But I think that sometimes we need to also understand that, that even if we all use, like no straws, not even like the paper straws, no straws, right? And even if we all, use like the reef-friendly sunscreens, etc., if there are these, big things happening around the world, and if we don't advocate enough against them, and it can be industries, stuff like fast fashion, right, stuff like, there's a lot of things that are no bueno for our ocean. Factory farming, we can talk about all of those things, and war being one of them as well. I think that we also tend to think, but we are in Aruba and it's so far away, how does this impact and matter to us? So I do like for us to talk about the individual stuff, but also the big things that do impact us, even if we like it, even if we participate in it or not. So, here we are.
Yeah. Even if we can't see it, like ocean degradation, if we don't see it, it's still happening, and it's impacting us.
So how is that happening right now in Aruba, right? Like the individual things. So let's talk about the individual things. What are things that if you three who are in this world, right, could tell the Aruban community to change or to do differently, or to consider? What would those things be? Go ahead.
It's a big and loaded
Not all at the
question.
same time.
It's
Not
a
all at the
big-
same time.
No.
I'll just break up and start with a few things, and please chime in, because
Yeah.
I'm sure it's really a lot.
Carolina is asking a world peace question.
Yes, here I am.
No, but there's a very, very long list of little things that we can all do every day that can help nature and help the oceans. And it starts basically with everything you buy. Ask the question, where did it come from? But also, what will happen with it when I'm done with it? Is there a proper way to dispose of it? And if that answer is basically no, ask yourself, do you really need it? For example, it can be simple things as whether you buy your olive oil in glass or in plastic. And it can be choosing the Coca-Cola in the plastic bottle or the cans. Just because we know the cans have better solutions for processing afterwards, that might be a better idea. Which beer are you drinking? Not being a commercial right now, but there's only one on Aruba that does recycling, that does reuse those bottles. So it's all those kinds of things. With your own consumption, you can have an impact. And even though maybe you as an individual feel like that impact is like just a drop in the big ocean, it's still that one drop. Because if everybody thinks, no, it's just one drop, then you're not there. So it's as soon as everybody thinks, well, at least that's my drop, then in no time, basically, you have thousands of droplets that made a difference. And so even though your individual impact might be small, it can be big because everybody does it and they follow your example as well, and they're encouraged by your example as well. Inside our seas, when we're in the waters, it's very important to realize that basically everything in the sea is living. So only if you see bare sand, that is safe to stand on. Seagrass, even there you have to be a little careful. But seagrass, corals, everything, just snorkel over them or swim over them. Don't step on it, because basically as soon as you step on it, you killed it. Yeah. And these are things you need to realize, that even that small impact, even touching a coral, can kill it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you then also have the not approved sunblock on your hand when you do it, that makes it even worse. But it can also be our medicine consumption. A lot of the medicines that we take as humans, the majority of it comes in our system, but then also comes out of our system. And when it comes out of our systems, it goes into the sewage water treatment plants. And I learned once in St. Thomas during a coral threat course, they've done research on the impacts of human estrogen on corals. And that comes with the pee from females that take the birth control pills. And that's not filtered out in any filtering process for sewage water. But it basically confuses the corals because it's a hormone, a reproduction hormone. And because of that, the corals do not spawn at the same time anymore, and they cannot reproduce anymore.
Oh, wow.
So
So your world peace question?
Yeah. Well, I think everybody that follows me knows I'm not using birth control, but
but you can go that far.
But I also do not recommend counting days, people. We're gonna have to work on this because
But it's the same with antibiotics. It really influences our systems in nature. Creates antibiotic resistance.
Yep.
That right now makes it very much more difficult to tackle certain coral diseases because you have that antibiotic resistance. But that's just a few examples, and there are many more. So thinking of your pollution, and thinking of all our recreation, advocating for better regulation of this. Basically demanding better regulation. And when you see people doing stuff in the water that they shouldn't be doing, you can say something about it. Wildlife feeding is a big one as well. People just thinking they're doing something good for nature, but feeding birds, parrotfish, turtles, it takes them away from their ecological function.
Okay.
So basically by giving a parrotfish bread, it gets its stomach full with something that's not nutritious for the parrotfish. But even more important, it takes the parrotfish away from its ecological role. Its ecological role is a very important one for Aruba, because the parrotfish, they keep our corals healthy by grazing off the algae that compete with the corals. And as they do this, you can also hear it underwater. They sometimes scrape off a bit of the skeleton from the corals, and that becomes sand through their digestive system, and it comes out. So the pupurigutu, as I call it,
is our
the
beautiful
parrotfish
white
poop
sand.
is our beautiful white sand.
Yep.
And I can still, you can pretty much imagine they cannot turn bread into sand.
Sadly, yep.
So it's really important that you're considerate of these roles, and basically wildlife feeding, especially in the sea, don't do it at all. On land, if you want to help out our nature, you can put some water for the birds because it's really dry and hot. But that's it.
Don't put food.
No food, because you make them dependent on humans, which is not natural. You take them away from their natural ecological role.
Interesting. Thank you for that explanation. And you gave very good examples, which I think that might make people go think and go on the internet and figure things out. I am still stuck on the birth control one. I knew, so For those of you that still don't know, I come from the healthcare sector. So of course, when I think about medicine, I think about antibiotics resistance, and I studied in the U.S. and in Florida in particular. This is an issue because people dispose medications through their toilets, right? So this is an issue, and there was a huge campaign about it, and there was do not do that. Do not flush your pills, right? Take them back to the pharmacy, and they will dispose them in a proper way, etc. But then, for some reason, although I do understand how the human body works, obviously, I didn't think about how something like that, right? And sometimes I guess we also make assumptions that filter systems would filter out whatever needs to be filtered out, and if hormones is it, that they would do that. But I think it's also important for us to understand that it does not do that. Right? So yeah, and that more studies are necessary, but also happening in a more holistic approach, because I don't think most people who are developing medications are necessarily having conversations with marine biologists about how is this going to impact, right, your work eventually. And I think that we are learning more and more that nothing happens in a silo, right? Everything is connected, and it is very important that these studies are done and that research is published and shared, so that people can demand more responsible development, I guess we would want to call it. All right, so I'm looking at the time and we have 10 minutes, so I want to ask, what is the most concerning thing or things in Aruba's ocean right now? What are the things that are on, I don't know, the top 3 or 5 that you are taking care of and that we should care about? Y'all are making it hard. I'm just gonna start saying names.
The thing is, I have a list going down, but okay, which one is more important?
Yeah. Or just pick 5.
Make it more difficult. No, so I'm gonna take from my field. I think that's the best. So I have a sustainability background, and I love what Siietske explained, because every time I explain also things, it goes back to the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's a change of lifestyle. I tried as much as possible to be a minimalistic, to live a minimalistic lifestyle, and also first you say if you need it. For me, it's always refuse first, and if you need it, then you purchase it. But for the ocean itself, I go back to the human behavior. So right now I don't want to be the person that always say this, but we have more and more people living on the island, more and more tourists coming to the island.
Mm-hmm.
So the system can't hold a lot more anymore. And I understand we live from tourism, it's our bread and butter, but it has to become more sustainable and more controlled in order to minimize these impacts. All these things that Siietske mentioned is because we're becoming more people on this island, and we cannot carry a lot more. Or we need to become more smarter, come with more regulations, but nobody likes regulations. So we have to think again on a personal level what you're doing, and also setting the tone for tourists, what is expected from them. Eventually, our island is not a theme park, it's our island, it's our home. So to be respectful also of our environment.
Thank you. I think that I have become less active on social media in regards to sharing my grievances. I now make very good use of this show to talk about the things that I care about. But, these are the things that I think we should really talk about, yes, and become vocal to the point where it drives change, right? And it is incredible to see the growth that has happened. My parents immigrated here like a couple months before I was born, and they say that too. They're like, the country we came to then to the country it is today is completely different. I can see it, right, from when I was a child. And development to a certain extent is good, right? I understand that. But I think that most of us can look around us and see that it's becoming a little tight, and it's a little too busy, and that means something. So I do think that it's healthy to have those conversations, within your family, with your friends, about how do we feel about those things, how is it impacting, maybe our everyday life, but also our sustainability for our island in the long term, right?
I mean, it's a finite system, it's a finite island. It will, although the economy keeps growing, or the population keeps growing, the size of the island remains the same. So
exactly, and its resources,
I'm sorry,
right?
Nicole.
No, but I do think it's important.
And like you mentioned, for me also, I don't go a lot on socials and voice these things. But whenever I'm having conversations, and in my position, I have a lot of conversations, I bring it up. It's for us to think about, because we know more hotels is on the way, so we know more the population will grow. So we have to really think and make decisions and be smart about it. And for a conservation organization, we need to guarantee that the integrity of our ecosystems and the biodiversity of our species are there.
Exactly.
I mean, or we could become a concrete jungle. Then you lose the character of an island. I would not want to live in such a space. I would want to still wake up, hear the birds, see the species running around. So yeah.
But we also know that it's not sustainable either, right? I mean, if we go for that, even if we would say like, we do a poll or a referendum, whatever, on the whole island, and everybody's like, I don't mind it being a concrete jungle. That is also where it's not that people's opinions doesn't matter. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that there are things that if we do not have the correct information, we might make decisions based upon, personal feelings, and that is not always the right decision. And that is why the work of people like all of you sitting here today, but everybody else that you work with, is so important, because you do understand things that regular people might not, and you do understand the impact of things that others might not, and then hopefully finding a way to explain that to us in a way that I can carry it and also feel accountable and feel responsible with what we decide and what we choose.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a change of mindset, of a change of perspective of how you view life in general. We don't own this island, so it's not just ours to live here, but it's also for the ones that are coming, to our future generation. But it's also for nature. I mean, nature was here first. And we have to see ourselves as part of nature and not dominant on nature. As the most developed species, you can say. We are perhaps the invasive one also. But we are
invasive one?
But we are the ones that have the capacity to also restore and protect and help nature.
Yeah, if we put our heads, mind, and everything into it, right?
You don't have to wait for a policy to change to make these changes.
I like that.
Nichole is a perfect example, right?
Exactly. Nichole, for everybody who might be listening and they feel inspired and they want to contribute one way or another, either if it's through volunteering, but if they also want to, start a different project that might also be helpful, what are words that you can tell them to encourage them to do so?
I would say, especially here, just because somebody else is not doing it, don't let that stop you from being the first. But also, just because somebody else is doing it, don't let that stop you from being the second.
The next.
Yes.
We need more people who care. So don't depend just on one person to be doing that or one organization to be doing that. There's enough work for everyone. And I think if you have the passion in your heart, you should follow it and not let stuff keep you from attempting it.
I love that. Thank you for that. Yes, I like that. I think that people often tend to look around, and if some organization already exists, and they're like, oh, we're not going to do it again. But like you said, there's so much work to be done to get involved with your organization.
In the ocean.
Where mermaids live, Carolina, duh.
That is usually where I try to be. No, our social media, so Facebook or Instagram, are usually the best ways to contact us.
Awesome.
And then we go from there. And I'd also like to point out, not a lot of people get the opportunity to go scuba diving or snorkeling. And a lot of, especially with scuba diving, that's because it's expensive. And that is one of the things that Scubble Bubbles tries to do, is to mitigate some of that cost for the local students.
Nice.
Because if they can see what's there and they can see what's happening to it and they can love it, then they'll feel that urgency and that responsibility. So I also encourage young people or parents of young people to reach out to us if they're interested in trying to become scuba certified.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Tyson and Siietske, if people are wondering, what projects you're working on and what's happening with our marine parks and our oceans, where can they find you, your organization, and what you're doing?
In nature. No, I'm kidding. We have also our Facebook and Instagram account. It's Aruba Conservation Foundation. We receive a lot of messages daily about different issues. So it's easy to reach us. If you want to send an email, just send it to our email account, info@acf.aue. And yeah, we are open to be able to connect everybody. And if we don't know what to do or we're not capable, we sure can direct you in the right direction.
Is there anything else, Siietske, you want to leave us with today?
No, just the change should have happened yesterday.
Yes.
Today is the next best option, and if you can't make the change today, then go for tomorrow.
Awesome. I love that. I do want to leave you with a little homework. And I hope that this encourages you to do some self-reflection work. Thank you, by the way, to all of you for sitting here and talking to me today. So I did this a couple of years ago. And I was really happy that I did. One, because it confirmed that the little actions that I was taking mattered, but also because it made me realize that there might be things that I had never thought about also have an impact. So you can go online on your favorite device, and you can just Google or whatever search engine you use. You can look up quizzes to measure your carbon footprint as a person. The result is not necessarily as important as you paying attention to the questions being asked, because there is where you realize what are the kind of things that do contribute to your carbon footprint. So these are things of like how often you shop, how often you do your laundry, if you choose cans, glass, or plastic items when you go grocery shopping. And I think that even going through this process, it helps you have that realization. So I encourage you to use it. Share it with me if you feel like it. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do it a giveaway because I just want you to do it. But but if that encourages you, then so be it. I think that it can be a good learning opportunity. Once again, today is World Oceans Day, so tell people that, and then maybe start a conversation about that today. And like Siietske said, then if not tomorrow, right? I hope you have a nice Saturday. I hope you have a nice weekend. Be nice, be kind out there. And I hope you have a nice week afterwards as well. And I will see you again next week. Yeah, thank you for listening to whatever I wanted to talk about today. Thank you to my awesome sponsors for allowing me to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about. Thank you to La Roche-Posay, to Toto, to Ecos, to Pringles. I appreciate you so much. And I will leave you with some commercials. And then you will go over to some music. Bye. Hi, I'm Carolina, and I am the host of Sincerely Carolina, a series of educational conversations about current social issues with local and international experts. Make sure you tune in every Saturday on Cool FM from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Bye! Welcome to a cleaner, greener world with Ecos Cleaning Supplies. Are you tired of harsh chemicals and seeking a sustainable solution for your home? Ecos is here to help. A range of eco-friendly cleaning products is not only kind to the environment, but also tough on dirt. Made with plant-derived ingredients and free from dyes and parabens, our products are safe for your family and the planet. Whether it's sparkling floors, hand soap, dish detergent, spotless counters, or laundry that smells like a fresh breeze, Ecos has you covered. Switch to Ecos today and experience the joy of clean living. Find us at your local store, Do It Center, Shaba, and Tara Eco Supplies, or visit www.taraeco.com. Ecos Cleaning Supplies. Clean consciously.